Secure the bag. Don't even blink, make them walk the plank. Light them up, let's make them sing. Fire the cannons, fire the cannons, fire the cannons. On Bucs, yeah, we on. Fire the cannons, fire the cannons, fire the cannons. The whole field's already on. Let me give you 55 reasons why this is our season. Palm trees breezing, opposing teams bleeding.
All right, welcome back to Buck What You Heard. My name is Gene. You can reach me at Buck What You Heard. Remember, you follow me, I will follow you back. You know, I love to talk football and anything else that comes up. I am joined by a special guest, former Buccaneer great, Bert Emanuel. Bert, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing good.
All right. You know, I appreciate you taking time to do this, man. And, you know, it's really, I don't know. I want to kind of get your thoughts. You know, the Bucs are facing the Rams to move on in the playoffs. You know, it has to kind of stir something up for you, you know, when you think about this.
You know, it does. Every time they've faced each other since 1999, I get that feeling again. And so this time it's a little different, you know, two really good teams. You know, I've got history with Tom Brady. You know, that was I was there when Tom took over in New England, and I used to stay after, and Tom would want me to run 50 more routes every day. And, you know, as almost a 10-year vet, I'm thinking, Tom, I can give you maybe 5 reps, but not 50. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, you know, something that it doesn't feel like it's been 23 years since I played in this matchup.
Yeah. So what have you been doing with yourself and you know, since you've kind of been away from the NFL itself?
A lot of things, you know, become an entrepreneur, invented a few things. You know, I think the most important thing, I've spent a lot of time with my family. I've got 5 kiddos, got 4 girls, and then my son is the baby. I had my 2 oldest daughters actually attended the University of Georgia. They played softball there, had wonderful careers. They both, together, they went to 2 College World Series. And so just an outstanding time, you know, being kind of the dad, supportive dad, and watching them play. And then my younger 2 girls were track athletes. And one went to North Texas to run track, where she excelled. And then my youngest daughter may have been, and I know I'm going to probably get some flack from this, but she may have been the fastest of them all. But she dealt with stress fractures for several years, and she had to unfortunately put the sport down. She's currently at LSU. She's a sophomore at LSU, doing great. And then there's my son, you know, basketball, football, track. You know, when you look at him, you look at me, you know, I'm 6 foot, 180. He's 6'4", 210. And he thinks he's the best athlete in the family. So we go round and round a little bit. So it's been fun over the last 17, 18 years, just being in their lives, you know, coaching them, giving them a piece of the sport from a mental perspective that was poured into me for all of those years, and just watching them excel.
Yeah, you know, Ridge Point High School, man. I think there was a game where he was responsible for about 400 yards. I mean, this guy he's balling. I mean, and I think this is his junior year right now, right? Or is he?
No, this is his senior year. This is his senior
okay.
year.
Okay.
You know, he went through that COVID year where, you know, half the games were canceled. We didn't know if we were going to play. We didn't know if we weren't going to play. It was during the time where, you know, we all shut down and no one went to school. And so, but this is his senior year, and yeah, he's had a good year.
As a parent, this is where it's important to instill the mental and keep them motivated when you're in a situation like this, to where he's ready to get back. And we saw how he rebounded this year. I think he's in a great position right now. I think what he's got several prospects. Is Northwestern still the leading prospect for him to possibly attend?
We don't know. I mean, that's kind of the nuance with recruiting, right? There's so many different unknowns. There's so many different variables,
Mm,
and then you kind of throw in the transfer portal. It's really impacted, I think, high school recruiting, and so this has been an experience.
right.
Some good, some bad, some indifferent, but I think hopefully over the next couple of years, the athletes that are coming through high school will get some semblance of the old normalcy, and things will kind of settle themselves, and recruiting will be a lot more like we expected back in the day.
So, real quick, and I'm just kind of curious, I want to get your thoughts on this. You look at Deion Sanders and what Deion Sanders has been able to build, and it isn't so much the prestige of the school, but it's the teaching of men. I guess I've heard a lot about Bobby Bowden and how he was a leader of men, and he raised, he kind of not raised, but he helped players to have some semblance of being a man, going into the pro ranks. And you see what Deion Sanders is kind of doing that. You as a parent, I mean, you being able to be a full-time parent, be there and help your kids. I mean, what are your thoughts on when you see a Deion Sanders being able to come in and instill his knowledge with these young men, and trying to get them through college and get them into adulthood?
I think it's fantastic, man. I wish we could put Dion in a bottle and sprinkle him out, across, a multitude of programs. And I think what you really get from what he is doing is he's giving athletes a sense of identity.
Mhm.
And I think that's really important. And I think a lot of athletes at that age, they struggle with confidence, they struggle with self-assuredness, they struggle with identity, and they're not sure, where the lines are blurred. Can you be confident but not arrogant? Can you be arrogant but not disrespectful? Can you be respectful and still have all of those nuances, associated with your character and your personality and your behavior? And so I think what Dion is saying, hey, look, it's okay to have a little bit of outside the box thinking and self assuredness and self awareness and self confidence, because at the end of the day, if you don't think that you can do what you can do, then you probably won't be able to do it. And so I think providing that stability of identity, and that element of identity into not only a program but each individual kid, um, that is just that speaks volumes. I mean, you
That
see what he
that's the
what he
key,
did.
right? Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's the key
absolutely.
right there. Just being able to do that, because now you have a reflection of yourself here in a position of leadership, and it's a motivator,
It
because
is. It is.
you'll run through a wall for this man, because he's he looks like me, sounds like me. I can relate to him, and this is what I want to do. And this guy genuinely has my best interest at heart. And I can't speak for everybody's situation, but like, and I look at my son. My son wanted to play football. I was like, okay, cool. I'm all for it. But I'm not going to be the parent that, I'm not that helicopter parent where you got to do this and this. It's got to be fun for him. It's got to
Right.
be something that
Exactly.
that he appreciates. And
Exactly.
I don't want to be that guy that's like ruins the sport for him, because I'm trying to live my life through him. Because
Right.
now
Right.
hopefully he's not watching, but he was 10 times faster than me. He's 10 times more physical than me. He is an amazing athlete, but at the end of the day, it got to a point where it wasn't fun for him. So I
Right.
didn't force it on him. And I'm like, okay, you did as much as you can do. And, I appreciate, what you've done. And again, it just was one of those situations where it wasn't for him. And he went on a totally different direction. But
Right.
kind of getting back to what Dion's saying, it's good to have role models like yourself, somebody that you can look at and say, okay, I can relate to this. And you kind of build from that. So what you've done is greatly appreciated. Being a full-time parent, being able to be there, and time is the most valuable thing that we own. Nobody
Yeah.
can take it from you, and nobody can give it to you. It's yours,
Right.
and when you direct it to where it needs to go, that's just what you've done. So,
Yeah.
much appreciated to you and respect to you for, how things have worked out, for your kids.
Thank you.
And I do want to kind of get back to, this game this weekend. This has been a fun season for me. And I don't know, have you been following the Bucks, or
I
is the
have.
hasn't this been, you look at some of the matchups that you've seen, and historically you've seen games where the Tampa Bay Bucks lose these games, but they're playing as a team. You've got people injured, but they still come together collectively as a team and find a way to win games. And we haven't seen this in Tampa. And for you, what are some of the insight that you might have that you're as you're watching these games?
I think leadership stands out the most. Obviously, I think Tom is a great leader.
Yeah,
He's been there, he's done that, and not just one time, not just two times, not just three times. He's done that for the last 20 years, and he's had a tremendous amount of success. I also think that that leadership carries over into the locker room, and more importantly, on the practice field. And
right,
so when guys have a sense of urgency and a sense of intention when they go out and practice, what you see is the result of that on Sundays.
mhm,
You see the playing unconsciously. Everyone has everyone's back. Regardless of what happens, there's a sense of confidence and a sense of calm that, hey, look, all we have to do is settle ourselves and we'll figure out a way to win because we've prepared at such a high level. And so I think that might have been missing, over the
yeah,
years.
100.
But, ironically, it only takes one or two players to really change the culture of a program. And I think, the leadership part really is more about getting everyone else to play at their best.
Right.
Leaders that can instill that in their teammates are the ones that you want to follow. It's not the ones that stick out and say, it's me, it's all about me, I'm the greatest. The team won't be X, Y, and Z without my presence. That's not what leadership is. It really is a servancy about it, a servanthood. And how can I impact someone else to get them to play, to the best of their ability? And so you've got that. You've got that on defense. You've got that on offense. You've got young players that are playing like vets. You got vets that are playing like young players. And so you've just got a tremendously, positive movement, despite some of the things that we've seen on TV the last couple of weeks,
Right.
and so I don't think that's going to impact the team whatsoever.
I like that. And I want to kind of go back here. Sean King. I love Sean King. I love the draft pick. I used to watch him when he was at Tulane, and I was like, wow, the Bucks were able to land him, and just once he was in that starting position and how he played. Um, did you see that leadership from Sean King? When he was leading your team down the field.
Yes, in the game, yes. I think when Sean took over, it was a little bit of a shock wave, right? So, most people don't know or don't remember. Trent Dilfer was benched.
Yeah.
Actually, me and Trent were both benched. I was dealing with a multitude of injuries, just
Mhm.
could not stay healthy. Trent had gone through a little bit of a spell where he wasn't playing well. We both were benched at the same time, and our backups got hurt. And we both came back the very next week, and we were back in the starting lineup. Unfortunately for Trent, Trent came back and broke his collarbone.
I remember.
And so his backup got hurt. Trent came back, got hurt. And so now there's Sean. We could see elements of his ability to throw, his accuracy, his understanding of the game, his football IQ. You could see all of that in a young guy, but nobody envisioned, plugging him into the lineup, on our run for, a championship. And so I can't remember how many games we won in a row, but I think it was 10 or 11. And Sean was at the helm of that.
Yeah.
And so, here we are at the NFC championship game. We had played, 9-10 games with Sean as a quarterback. And, so we had gotten over that, right? Now it's all about, hey, let's win the game and let's execute. And so we had a lot of positive conversation. And, we, at that moment, we felt like, Sean was going to be able to lead us, to the promised land. So his leadership really didn't come to fruition until he settled himself after, so many games. And then he realized, hey, I can play at this level. Forget about being a rookie. I can make plays just like everybody else. And then you kind of saw that kind of come out.
Yeah. And I will say this, I've been following Sean on Twitter for some time now, and Sean King and Steve White are two people that you just learn. I learned so much in their tweets. Just, hey, look at this and this and this. And I'm just like, I'm a sponge when it comes to football. I mean, I didn't really get into game film until like maybe 6-7 years ago, to where I'm like trying to break down the game, trying to understand it a whole lot more. And people like Sean King, people like Steve White, he would be like, hey, this play here happened. So you go back and you watch it and you get to understand it a little bit more. You're looking at the offensive linemen, you see how their feet are set, and what kind of plays coming up. And it just, there is so much. But I'm just jealous of you guys. Like, for you, I'm sure that you've watched more game film than I could ever. I probably would never catch up with you when it comes to game film. Just and I'm sure you watching the game is entertaining, because I'm going to give you an example. My wife is a nurse. When a medical show comes on, she's ruined that show for me within the first 10 minutes. She's like, this is not true. This is not true. This isn't right. She's breaking down the film for me. Like, oh no, this isn't even realistic. No. And so I tell you, about 15 minutes in, I'm like, okay, I don't even want to watch this anymore. Let's move on. So, like, for you watching a game, I mean, it's just like that muscle memory. You see plays, and you see plays develop, and you look at receivers, and you're like, okay, this guy rounded off his route. This guy ran a clean route, and you see that kind of thing. It's just like natural to you.
Right. It is. If you play long enough, fortunately you're around, very talented, knowledgeable people, coaches, players, quarterbacks, and you pick up on things. You sit in meetings all week long, you watch hours and hours of film, and you're looking for some small clue, something very, very small, something very slight that would give you an edge. And you do that over and over and over and over again. And so, if you play close to 10 years, you've watched thousands of hours of film, and you've picked up on all of these clues, where now you can sit down and watch a game and you're like, okay, their alignment is wrong. It looks like he's going to run an out route and he's on the bottom of the numbers, no room to throw the ball. Ball gets thrown out of bounds, and they say, hey, the quarterback threw the ball out of bounds. Well, not necessarily. Okay, he's got to keep the ball out in front. The receiver didn't align correctly and didn't give the quarterback enough room to complete the pass. Well, those things are very obvious to us, and so, those are some of the things that I love, sharing with my son. We had a scenario this year where they call themselves the Garage Boys. We converted our garage into a gym, and then we have a little table where we kind of build a miniature football field. And we invited all of the starting receivers, the starting running back, and the starting tight end. And we went over all of these nuances. We stayed for about hour and a half, and it was all about teaching and showing and demonstrating. And so giving them, the little small nuggets of the game that, typically, are hard to come by unless you play at a certain level. And so that's really, I think, the big benefit and the excitement has been is to really share that, and then go sit in the stands and watch it be applied and executed. I think that's really the amazing part.
Man, and just the fact that they listen to you and they pick up on what you're saying, that's got to be probably the most rewarding thing. Because you could tell people things, but it's are they going to learn it? Are they going to pick up on it? Are they going to act on it? And
Yeah.
that's probably one of the biggest things. I remember, and again, I just kind of get back to the Bucs here. I remember an article that you were, I think it was in the Times, and you had talked about how you struggled with, the whole catch thing, and it was one of your kids that really helped you to get past that. And I really wanted to kind of get your thoughts, because I'm going to tell you right now, as a parent, you have to be very, if in order to listen to your kids, which I try my best to do, you have to be a very humble person to be able to do that, and just, kind of take in what they're saying. And for me, I want to always, like me doing what I do here with Buck, what you heard, I'm always willing to listen to people. I'm always, if there's something that I can improve on, or something you think I'm not doing, or something that may make the show better, I'm always willing to listen to it. And my son, he's like, hey, try this and this and this, and I'm like, okay, cool, I'll do that. And then I thought about you when I had invited you on, and you said yes. I thought about the article where you talked about how your kid helped you to get over or get past and understand a little bit more with the catch, and how it's helped people. And whether you like it or not, you are a member of Buccaneer lore. I mean, just because of everything that's happened, good or
Right.
bad, just where you
Right.
are. So I
Right.
just kind of wanted to kind of get your thoughts on that, and if you can kind of expound on that, how they helped you to get past that.
Yeah, first of all, being a professional athlete, there is a tremendous amount of stress, anxiety, want to pressure to perform at the highest level every single time you put on the uniform. It is something that you really can't explain, other than explain it in words, but in feelings and emotions, and the psychological and physiological changes and things that you have to deal with are just astronomical. And so when you look at the magnitude of making a catch when we were so close, all of the hours of practice and film study.
And what was that route, by the way, that you
It was
ran?
a whip route.
Was it
Yeah,
okay?
yeah. And so, and to be in a position after the game, being ushered off the field, confetti's raining down, and just utter confusion and chaos and turmoil, and you're sitting at your locker and you're thinking, what did I do? Every athlete has this this self-reflection after every game. Did I do my best? Could I have done more? What should I have done in this scenario? Because it's going to come up again to be successful. And so to be in that situation where there was so much controversy for years, I never spoke about it. And here it is 17, 18 years later, and my son is, 12 years old, and, I've got pictures on the wall, and I've got jerseys and all this stuff. And one day, literally, well, before that, every day he would come home for about 2 or 3 years, and he would say, that was your fault. You shouldn't have dove for the ball. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, I have actually watched this route, and your feet were too close together. Your feet you should have had a wider base. And if you had a wider base, you wouldn't have had to dive for it, and you could have caught it standing up. he's a quarterback, right? So he's analytical. So he's processing this whole thing. And so he's 10, 11 years, 12 years old. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? I planted. I ran the route the way it was supposed to be run. Sean threw the ball, on time. It got on me kind of quick. And then I found myself going back and forth with an 11-year-old. And I'm like, hold on a minute. I'm the pro. You can't evaluate me, right? This is the other way around. And so we had this, and we have a really, really special relationship. I got a special relationship with each of the kids. But since he's the only son and he was not there during my career, I have a really unique relationship with him. I've taken him to Super Bowl 50. It was just me and him. And he got a chance to see backstage, and I spoke about the catch. And it was so we've got a really he has an open door to question things, right? And so he said, Dad, you got all these pictures on the wall. Where's the catch? And I said, it's not really something that I've ever wanted to really embrace like that. Mm-hmm. And he said, why? He said, you changed the game. And I said, well, I thought you were critical of me coming out of my break. And he's like, no. That's not what I was trying to get to. What I was trying to get to was I wanted it to count as a catch so you could go to the Super Bowl. And I said, okay. He said, but Dad, since it was so impactful, you need to have a picture of it. Where's the picture? And so I said, I don't know where the picture is. And, I've never really thought about it. And he said, well, I think you need to call the Tampa Tribune. And I was like, how do you know about the Tampa Tribune? And he said, well, I looked it up.
Because you guys are living in Texas at this time, right?
Yeah, we're in Texas. Yeah. And he said, well, I looked it up. And I said, well, I don't even know the number. He said, well, I have the number already. And I'm like, okay. So he's helping me kind of break down the walls, right? He's kind of sharing with me that despite what I felt at the moment, look bigger, look potentially bigger at maybe the impact that it's had on the game, the NFL game, the college game, the high school game, Pop Warner. Mm-hmm. And so I said, okay, I'll call, but I'm telling you, BJ, we call him BJ, Bert Jr. I'm telling you, BJ, they don't have the picture. And if they don't have it, then they don't have it. I'm fine with that. So I picked up the phone and I called and I said, hey, I don't think you guys know who I am, but my name is Bert Emanuel, and I used to play for the Bucs. And I had this catch 18 years ago that was overturned and created a lot of controversy. And it turned into a rule, and it's called the Bert Emanuel Rule. And I was wondering if you guys have a photo of it. And the guy on the other end said, I get chill bumps every time I tell the story. He said, we've been waiting for your phone call for 18 years.
Wow.
He said, there's one picture and it's in a vault. And we were only told that to give it to you if you ever requested it. It's yours. And dude, my eyes just kind of well up still, when I tell the story, because someone else thought so much more about that moment than I did. I took it very, very personally, and it was hard for me to get over. I was the one that kept the Bucs from advancing to the Super Bowl, and I never told anyone. And so the first thing I said was, the gentleman said, are you still there? And I'm like, yeah, I'm actually here. I can't believe that you guys actually preserved it. And they said, yes, we did. And I said, so can I have it? And they said, yes, you can. And I said, well, how big is it? And they said, it's an 8x10. It was shot before digital cameras. So we can only blow it up to a certain amount, but we can send you both of them and you'll have them tomorrow. And once you receive it, you have all rights to the photo. And man, the next morning it arrived at my front door, and it was just the most beautiful thing I think I've ever been a part of. And so since then, we laugh and joke about it because he's 18 now, and he vaguely remembers that conversation. But he is actually the inspiration behind me getting past the fact
That
that,
is amazing.
yeah, it was just literally a casual conversation, but he was not going to let me, you know, say no. And
I can tell you I can tell you right now, no lie, I did not watch that Super Bowl. That was one of the few Super Bowls I did not watch. I didn't watch that Super Bowl, and I think there was an apology letter from the NFL or something.
It
And
was.
that made me even madder. I was
Yeah.
furious.
Yeah.
And I don't want to kind of get off on another tangent here, but
Yeah.
my problem with the refs has always been inconsistency. And that's I don't mind a ref doing their job. You're doing your job. That's what you're here to do. That's what you're supposed to
Right.
do. But I think it was that year there were a couple of bad calls that the Bucs that didn't go the Bucs way. And I saw it one week, and then the next week you have a different officiating crew come in, and it's not the same. And it was at that point, that next year, I was like, there's no consistency here.
Yep. Yep.
Fast forward to 2 years ago, I had no idea about sports gambling. I still don't. I just understand from what people tell me.
Mm-hmm.
I had somebody break it down to me that, when some people make bets, they factor in who the referees are.
Mm.
And I have a problem with that because it should all be consistent. Everything should be, regardless of who your crew is, it should all be consistent in my opinion. And now,
Right.
you look now, we've got sports betting, and it's concerning. I've seen some calls this year that you didn't see with the refs that the scab refs that they had when they had the strike. They were making better calls than some of the refs that are regular refs now. And
Right.
again,
Right.
it's one of those things. Yeah, make the call. I get it, you making the call, but at the end of the day, it should all be consistent. This crew should be the same as this crew, or they should be somewhere similar. They shouldn't factor into somebody making a wager, and you're looking at them like, well, wait a minute, this crew is going to be here, so you have to bet this way. That's just unbelievable. And the fact that I can look at a picture and know who Jerome Bogart is, but I have to look at a bunch of pictures to figure out who Cooper Kupp is.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem to me, again.
Right.
And it takes away from the people that are on the field and they're doing their best. And maybe I'm wrong here in my thinking, but the refs just factor into games in the worst way at times, and it's just a struggle for me. And I think it kind of takes away from the game itself.
Yeah, as players, we never really get involved in
I don't think you really could, though.
a particular officiating crew, unless it's really, really a scenario where there's consistency with bad calls. Now, what I think happened in particular, and I can only speak from my experience with the catch and the catch rule, the NFL did submit a letter to the Buccaneers acknowledging the mistake, apologizing, basically saying as of that day, which was, so many days after the Super Bowl, my catch would be called a catch and not be overturned. And it was Walt Anderson. I actually bumped into him probably 15 years after the catch. It's crazy. In some workout facility down here in Houston.
What was that like?
And it was a friend of mine that was with me, and he said, "Hey, do you know who that guy is?" And I was like, "No, but he's got to work for the NFL because he's got a hat on that has an NFL logo on it. And the only way you can get that hat is if you're an employee."
Right.
And so he walks over to me and he says, "Hi, Bert. I called your catch a catch." And I'm like, oh my God, you were the side judge. And he's like, yes, my name is Walt Anderson. And Walt, I believe Walt is still officiating. And he's from Houston. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, okay. Tell me from your perspective. He said it was no question at all. You were actually facing me. I saw the ball on your chest. I saw when you hit the ground, and there was no question that that wasn't a catch. And so I was called into the competition committee meetings, and I was asked to explain why I called it a catch. And I explained, and they said, well, we need to change the rule. What should we call it? And he said it was my suggestion to say, let's call it the Bert
Really?
Emanuel. And man, again, I mean, this is a thing that's just,
Yeah.
It's much bigger. I don't know who's listening out there, but maybe someday this is a movie, but
Yeah.
it really is almost kind of bigger than life. And so when you get to the rule and the rule being changed and the rule being written from a different definition perspective, the problem, I think, from that point on, because nobody really could understand what was a catch, what wasn't a catch for years.
And I think the rules changed a couple more times since then.
It has changed a couple of times. They've tried to simplify it. They've tried to, really define it in terms that can be easily applicable to the Pop Warner game, essentially,
Yeah.
But I think the problem has been the interpretation of the rule, right? So what's written on paper is one, but how it's interpreted by each individual official, because there's some subjectivity to it, right?
Right.
There's still a human being in the booth,
Right.
okay, using his subjectivity and his eye and his knowledge and everything that he knows to still say, yes, it's a catch. No, it's not a catch. And I've always said, we don't need modern technology to make common sense decisions. And so sometimes I think we overanalyze things. And I think when the rule has some vagueness to it and a lot of subjectivity, and then we overanalyze, then we get confusion. And I think, then you get the Dez Bryant, and then you get the Megatron, and then you get, I can't remember the tight end for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and somebody asked, well, what do you think about Dez Bryant's catch? Well, I will tell you this from a receiver's perspective, there's not a receiver on the planet that will reach for further yardage unless he has control over the ball.
100%.
Okay? That is not something that we're ever taught to reach out as we're juggling or trying to find possession or control.
Right.
And so the fact that Dez reached, in his mind, he had established control of the ball. Now I'm trying to advance. Okay.
Right.
So those have been issues, I think, over the years where the interpretation of the rule has fluctuated, right? It's varied. One officiating crew feels like it's this. One officiating crew feels this way. One officiating crew feels another way. And when there's slight variations, you've got inconsistency.
You know what I really appreciated was the XFL and the transparency that you had between the refs, people in New York, and the people on the field, people in the booth. There was just transparency as a fan, and I'm watching this and I'm listening to the conversation. I can sit here and say, okay, that makes sense. I'm good with that. I don't think, another sidebar here, but I think with the XFL, I had a little bit more respect, and I don't say respect, but I had a lot more confidence in the refs and the way the games were being called, because you could sit here and listen to it. You had a better understanding of how things were going. And if there was anything that was taken away from the XFL that maybe the NFL could work with, would be having that kind of transparency to, have, because you're getting rid of so much controversy if you have that transparency between the refs on the field, who's ever in New York or whoever's in the booth. You have that consistency, and it just makes the game flow that much smoother, and it adds credibility to the league.
It does. And there was one thing. So for the XFL Houston Roughnecks, I was over the business operations and reported to our team president. And I was also the liaison to the football operations side, where June Jones was our head coach, who drafted me to the Atlanta Falcons.
I was gonna throw something in there,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
that's right.
And I was also over game day management, game day events and entertainment. And what we tried to do, because the rules were slightly different than the traditional game, what we decided to do was have two in-stadium hosts on a live mic. One would be responsible for in-game entertainment, and the other was responsible for rules and explaining the rules to the fans
Exactly.
during timeouts. And it really, we sat down with league office and said, the initial call was everyone needs to have one on the field in-game host. And, me being an outside the box thinker, I said, we need two. And they said, well, why do you need two? And I said, because since the rules are slightly different, what we don't want fans to watch the game and try to figure out what's going on. We want to tell them so that they can sit and enjoy it.
That's
and
right.
So that's where we really excelled from that standpoint. The kickoff was different. The extra points were different. Going for two, going for three, going for four. I mean, all those things were different. The pace of the game was different. So we came up with a script where host two, would identify rules or certain situations and say, okay, this is why we're doing X. And this is the difference between the XFL game and the traditional football game. Yeah. And I think it went off really well. I think people really enjoyed it. I think people started to understand it a lot more. And so there are so many different things that happen in the NFL game that have changed since I played. And I think fans are still saying, well, what, why isn't that a catch? Well, why is that intentional grounding? Or why is that targeting? And, and I think those are some small nuggets that could potentially be transferred over.
100%. And if you're sitting here explaining to the listeners, this is why this play was called. This is why this was pass interference. This is why this was roughing the passer. This is why this occurred. It makes people understand, and okay, that makes sense. I understand that. Let's move on. And adds, again, as I mentioned before, it adds credibility to the game. It's to the league, number one, and it makes people understand, okay, this is what's happening, and it kind of helps with the game as well. So,
absolutely.
I've wondered, and I want to get your opinion on this. With the XFL coming back, will you possibly be a part of any of that, or can you not?
I don't know. I
don't want to put you on the spot. I'm not. We can go on to the next thing here.
Yeah, no. That's great. Yeah, if they called, I would love to go back because I think we had such a great experience.
It was a great product.
We had a good product. We had fans in the stand. I mean, literally, after our first game, I sat there and because I was over game day events, I sat there in the middle of the field and I'm thinking, I've got to change my mindset, right? I mean, my NFL career works and gives me some substance, but this is outside the box, right? This is almost a new box, And so we started, thinking really, really outside the box. And we had DJ up here and we had, lights like you're in a
Yeah.
club, and we had mute. I mean, it was that next game. There was so many people. I invited like my NFL friends and buddies that had played, and I'm getting text messages, and they're saying this is just off the
I never missed
chain.
a
Like,
game.
I've never
I
seen
never
anything like
missed.
this.
Yeah, and I never missed a game, and it was fun.
It was
And
fun. Yeah.
with the one thing that I really loved about the XFL is they cared about people enough as
Yeah.
far as injuries
Yeah.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
When they did away with the kickoff, and they're like, okay, here, take the ball out here, and this is what you're going to do. I
Yeah.
mean, you eliminate any opportunity for an injury at that point. I understand that
Right.
football is still a violent sport. You will have injuries, but I think you kind of scale back on what could potentially happen. So,
Yeah, they did a good job from a rules perspective, and the game being played at a much faster level or pace.
yeah,
That was actually something that we had to get used to. We're being a staunch NFL veteran guy. You're used to TV timeouts and change of
right.
possession timeouts, and I'm thinking I'm over game day and I'm managing commercials, and I'm like, whoa, why are we starting so quick? I mean, it's like, oh, I forgot. We got to keep this thing going. And so it was a lot of fun. We had a great experience. I will have to say that we were 5-0, and so we were the only undefeated team. So, in theory,
Yeah.
we should have been King of the Champions. And so I would love to go back and be a part of it. I think it was great. We played at University of Houston, which is 15 minutes from my home. I mean, it was like the best of both worlds for me, being on the business side, loving, the business aspect, and then, interacting with the football side. And so I think that was great.
And it was kind of really frustrating for me that there are coaches like Pep Hamilton that was he in the XFL or was he AFL?
Yeah, no, he was he was
Oh,
he was
okay.
XFL. Yeah, he was XFL. Mhm.
And the fact that he's not gotten any opportunities, he's an amazing coach, great football mind, high football IQ. And, again, this is my show. I can say what I want. You see so many retreads out there, and you've seen this movie before, but now you're seeing it in a different location with same results. And guys like him aren't, they're looked at it, okay, he can be offensive coordinator, but can he lead a team? I 100% believe that he could. And I think that he would inject life into an organization if he was just given the opportunity. So, there were a couple of coaches that I saw that I look at them and I'm like, I look at the play calling and the way they ran their team, and I'm like, they could do this on the next level. They could do this on the NFL level. But they just haven't gotten the opportunity. So again, so many great memories, just watching all this. And I hope that we get more of the same when it comes back. Unfortunately from so many, COVID came along at such a bad time that I really believe that, had COVID not come along, the XFL would be so much further along than what it is.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. I think there was such a positive momentum, and a positive reception from all the sports fans out there. Even the teams that had I call it dual residency with NFL teams. There was just a positive reception, and I think at some level, I think it makes a lot of sense from an analytical standpoint and from a recruiting and player evaluation standpoint.
Right.
You have a semi-pro or minor league concept without diminishing the brand.
Right.
It gives players opportunities to play and continue their career in hopes of potentially being picked up by an NFL team.
Exactly.
And so I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that I know our last home game, I think we had 15 NFL scouts there. And so,
Yeah. And
so they, it was a great product. And it was all about football. And so hopefully The Rock and his management group, they are able to restore the XFL to the levels, that it was right before the pandemic.
Yeah. Hey, one of the listeners had a question for you. What do you think of teams being able to interview coaches still in the playoff games for vacant jobs? Is that more of a distraction, or is it a good idea?
I can't imagine, getting ready for a divisional playoff game and getting ready for an interview, um, and being able to put on a game face and be 100% focused. I think you put coaches in a bad scenario. Um, I think teams don't get a chance to get or see the best of that particular coach.
I
And
just don't get the logic behind it.
it's almost like you need to wait until everything is over with,
Right.
and the unfortunate thing is, the longer you wait, the jobs are taken,
Yeah.
because there's teams that are not in the playoffs, and those coaches may be the coaches that are getting interviewed.
Yeah.
Or you have a bad interview because you've been up all week, preparing for the divisional playoff on a Saturday afternoon. You can't put your best into the interview, and they may not get a good feel, and they go with someone else.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just I just think it's a bad scenario, and it doesn't allow coaches to really put forth,
The
their A game.
best. Yeah, exactly.
You can't, you don't have two A games going at the same time. One's going to be a B or C, and one's going to be an A. I'm just being real honest with you.
Yeah, and that's exactly kind of where I was with this. I didn't think it was a good idea, because you're taking away from your team. Your team right now, that these are the people that have been riding with you all season.
Yep.
They're at this moment the most important part of your life, and then here you are talking about potentially going to coach somewhere else. So yeah, I appreciate that answer. I have another question for you. It's kind of off subject here. What was it like working with Rich McKay? I don't know how close you were with him, or how what kind of relationship you had with him. For me, I look at him, he's a great football mind, and he's one of those guys that I've always looked at as being instrumental with the Bucs getting to the Super Bowl, their first Super Bowl.
Rich was a pioneer. When I got to the Bucs, Rich was our GM, and most people don't realize that I was classified as a restricted free agent
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
when I left Atlanta. So I was tagged a transitional guy. I don't even know if they have transitional free agents anymore. You were either a franchise guy or you were a transition guy, and so because of that, the Atlanta Falcons secured the opportunity to match any offer that I received from another team. So a lot of I was a highest rated free agent during that year, but once I became a transitional guy, everybody backed off because nobody essentially wanted to put forth a contract that Atlanta was just going to match. And it was 3 months. I think Buffalo called the morning of, and I told Coach Levy, I was like, Coach, you're amazing. It's just too cold. I just can't play in the cold. And he's like, "What? Are you kidding me?" I'm like, "Coach, I'm being dead honest. I'm being transparent. I am not a cold weather guy." And he said, "So you're declining?" I'm like, "Yeah, I think I have to decline." And boy, my agent was so upset at me. And so it wasn't until about 3 months later that I got even an opportunity to even talk to the Bucs because they weren't interested. But what Rich did, and I'm not going into a lot of details, but what we decided to do, I got really, really creative, and I wanted to catch Rich's attention on a very creative idea that it just blew his mind. And he was like, Yeah, let me think on that one. After saying no for like 6 or 7 times, and he's like, "Oh, that might work." Well, eventually, Rich sat down with my agent, and they created a really unique structure. And the structure was so unique that Atlanta decided not to match. I had no trade clause and all that stuff. And, we're talking, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. And, that was kind of unheard of, back then
Right.
for a position player, not a quarterback, but a position
Right.
player to have a no trade clause. So I thought he's an innovator. He's a pioneer. We had a pretty good relationship. Even when he left and went to Atlanta,
Atlanta.
I called Rich up, had a couple of questions about a couple of things, thought about getting into coaching, wanted to get into personnel. He always took my phone call, always, was
Class act.
helpful. Yeah, class act. And so yeah, it was, Rich is one of those guys that, I don't know if they have the Hall of Fame for GMs and executives, but I definitely think he deserves a lot of credit. He ran the competition committee meetings when the catch was overturned, and so he was instrumental in making sure that the NFL took responsibility and and that the Bert Emanuel rule stood the test of time.
Man, that is incredible. That's just like I said, man, just you're iconic, in Bucs lore, for what happened. And it's so great that, when everything came around to where you are now. Have you been to any Bucs games, or have you're just like, kind of watch from afar kind of thing, huh?
I have not been back to the Bucs to Raymond James since that year. And so I have not been to a Buck game. I have not heard from anyone, at the facility. I know that, the team has gone through a couple of different coaching staffs.
Right.
I've not heard from the ownership group. And, not that I felt like I needed to hear. I'm just saying that, typically when players leave, right? And,
Right.
team goes this direction, player goes this direction. And, that's, just the way things are done, not saying that there was any bad blood or anything. It's just the way
kind of how
things
it
are
is.
done. It's business as usual,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so I saw some things on Twitter that, hey, look, Sean and I should be honorary captains for this game. And I think somebody tweeted that he should throw me the coin. And I'm like, okay, how big is the coin? All right, because if I drop this thing, that's not a good look.
Exactly. That's incomplete right there.
I need a coin that's big like this, right?
One more thing, when we were talking about social media, I know that with the Bucs, there's been a lot of soft tissue injuries, and I hear people talking about the staff and trying to point to the staff as the reason for the soft tissue injuries. I have a different perspective, because like my son, I had my son working out with somebody who helped him with his technique with running, and I feel like, if your technique is good, you are running with the correct range of motion, that you don't normally get those injuries. And I think it all comes down to just how you run. And in my mind, the staff can't go out there and run for you. It's based on how you are stretching. And there are sometimes, because the NFL is so violent, you may make that cut and, boom, you've got a hamstring injury or a calf muscle or something like that. So I mean, I think a lot of the direction, a lot of it's misguided at the staff, the training staff, and I don't agree with, a lot of the times that they're blaming the staff for the injuries that you're seeing so many of, for instance, especially the soft tissue.
Yeah, I haven't really been following that as much, but from my perspective, training, the football athlete, needs to be involved in functional training. So, the movements that you're doing in season and primarily out of season um, should have a direct correlation to your position.
Right.
So, if you're a push pull guy, then you need to be, working those push pull, concepts. If you're a speed guy and a change of direction guy, you need to be working those types of concepts. There is one, and that's the way I've always trained my kids. And my girls at Georgia were, they were the fastest in the SEC. That's what they've all talked about. They were the Emanuel sisters, and they stole bases. They turned singles into doubles, doubles into triples, and we pattern ourselves based on speed.
Right.
My two track athletes, track is all based on speed, right?
Right.
And so never had any hamstring issues, never had any quad issues. Always worked on functional training. It's a little bit more of a linear sport than some of the others. And then football, my son, we worked in sand, we worked on hills, we worked in water, and it was tremendous the way his body responded. Never had soft tissue issues. Went the whole season this year playing quarterback. No hamstring, no quad, no hip, no calf, no nothing. And so some of that could be genetics. Some of that could be training. I think there's an element where nutrition, people, I think, don't give nutrition enough value. The body is a machine.
Yeah.
It's like a machine. It will break down. And so, you got to be careful of what you're putting into your body.
Right.
But I think that, I've always had this question mark, and it has nothing to do with my position, because as a receiver, I'm always running forward.
Right.
I'm all in theory, and I like to simplify things. I'm going to run straight. I'm going to make a left turn. I'm going to make a right turn, or I'm going to keep going. From a defensive perspective, DBs very rarely run forward. 90% of what they do is backwards.
Right.
Okay. They're backpedaling 80 to 90% every single play. They're backpedaling more than they're running forward.
Right.
And so I just don't quite understand why 90% of their training should be backwards.
Yeah. And then, but then
there are
when
different
you
muscles. Yeah, there are different muscles that you're working consistently in backpedaling, turning left, turning right, turning and running at a 45 degree, stopping, planting, coming up at a 90 degree or 45 degree. And so their type of training to me should vary greatly than a receiver's training, because one is going forward 80 to 90% of the time, and the other one is going backwards 80 to 90% of the time. And so it's just me. I'm sure there's probably some hardcore kinesiology folks watching, listening in, and probably saying, no, that doesn't make sense.
but that's logic. It's logical what you're saying,
Yeah. I just try to stay common sense focused, simplify things, and match what you do in high performance scenarios to how you train.
Right.
And so if I've got one of my daughters, her boyfriend is a defensive back at SMU, and he's had soft tissue issues.
Right.
And I said, well, how do you train? Well, I run 60s and I run 400s and I run 20s. And are you running or are you backpedaling?
Right.
And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, 80%, 90% of what you do is backpedal. So, backpedaling takes a different set of muscles and muscle groups, balance and coordination, than it does running forward. And so I like I said, You can probably get all kind of messages, and people are like, "He's wrong with that. Stick with football or whatever." And
no, but it makes
just my
sense
3 cents. Yeah,
because when you're backpedaling and then you transition to where you're running with somebody, I mean, that transition part right there puts a lot of wear on your body as well, too, because that's not a natural. It's not a natural movement for the body.
Not a natural movement at all. Yeah. So if you're
and
not training that way, if you're not
Right.
building the muscle groups to functionally respond and react like that, you want to stop on a dime and break, before the receiver breaks. Boom, there's an Achilles, there's an ankle, there's a quad, there's a hamstring, whatever that is. Maybe that's a scenario where you start really diving deep into, what am I doing on my own to get prepared for the season? And then what am I doing from a maintenance standpoint to continue to allow those muscle fibers to fire the way I want them to fire?
Right. And again, man, you just talking to you, just a wealth of information, and I really appreciate that. So, you got any thoughts on the playoffs this week? Are you any teams that you're liking here?
Well, I always say go Bucs. I think I think the Bills are going to be tough.
Yeah.
I think Tennessee is going to be tough just because they're playing at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I was born in Kansas City, and so I cannot ever root against Kansas City. And so, those are the teams that, I kind of like, and would love to see, those matchups.
So, as a wide receiver, what do you think about Cincinnati and their wide receiver room?
I think it's intriguing. I really do. I think they are the spoiler. And I think they're a scary team right now. Because if you go in there and think you're playing the old Cincinnati Bengals of old, and you look at their history, you're going to be watching games the very next Sunday
on the couch.
And so they are legit. And so you better be ready to play. Yeah.
Because Jamar Chase is amazing.
Yeah, he's legit. Yeah.
And he's one of those guys. I mean, you've seen some wide receivers come out, but just watching him play and watching him from game 1 to the end of the season, and just how much he picked up on the speed of the game and excelled with the speed of the game is just incredible. Just watching it. I'm a defensive guy. I love defensive backs and safeties, and I love the secondary, but I love watching those wide receivers get out there and do their thing because
it's interesting. Those guys are legit. I mean, they're, I kind of see why LSU was just
wide receiver university.
They ran through everyone, 60 touchdowns, 5,000 yards passing. I see it, you can see it now. So
with the league the way it is, do you feel like it would have been to your benefit if you, and again, I know it shoulda, coulda, woulda, but I mean, with the way things are, the way the rules are structured, would it have benefited? Because you were a great possession receiver, and the numbers, I don't think the numbers really gave you the credit for plays. You made plays when plays needed to be made. And would that have benefited you this NFL, today's NFL?
The fact that you can't touch me and there's no jam and there's no, oh man, I had almost 5,000 yards in 5 years, in 4 years. And so, I was a deep threat in Atlanta coming out of the run and shoot. We ran a totally different offense in Tampa. But going against the Dale Carters and the Martin Mayhews and, those guys were big and physical. I remember going against Dale when he was in Denver, And at halftime, I was just exhausted. And I had scratches on my neck, and my jersey was ripped, um, and I had to essentially change. I had to
Mhm.
switch into a new jersey. And after the game, I ended up with about 7 or 8 catches, but it was a work horse. I mean, it was after the game, he came over and said, "Dude, at halftime, I was spent. I had to change jerseys." I'm like, "You just took the word out of my mouth," because I was just, I mean, but that's the way the game
Yeah,
was.
right.
It was a grunge to it,
Mhm.
and you had to really dig down deep because otherwise you couldn't survive,
Yeah, yeah, your
and so today,
the mindset was different then.
totally different. Yeah. And so I think today, obviously, I think there would have been a lot of success.
Mhm.
Um, you can't bump and run. You can't quick jam to the throat.
Yeah.
You can't grab it. There's no spearing. There's no this. I mean,
And no
you
horse
had to,
collar tackles
there's
or
no horsepower. I mean, there's all these things that you had to be cognizant of,
yeah,
and you had to play despite of. And so, they're just hats off to the old guys that created, such a unique platform for us to
yeah,
be successful. And I think hats off to the new guys too, with the creativity and their ability to come in and become superstars, right off the bat.
right. Yeah, most definitely. Well, Bert, thank you so much for taking time, man. I really appreciate you. Hopefully I can get you on again, man. This was so much
Yeah.
fun. You are
Yeah.
a wealth of information. I should probably be charging you for all for the class tonight, man. And again, you answered so many questions for me, and I really appreciate you.
Hey, it's been great. It's been
Oh,
great. Yep. Let's stay in touch.
oh, most
Absolutely.
definitely. Hey,
Yep.
tell everybody how they can get a hold of you, and what do you have going on? Anything that we should be following, or any charities or anything like that that you're working with? That because that's kind of big for me is
Right.
charities. My grandmother always said you can tell a lot about a person by how they treat people less fortunate than yourself. So
Right.
if you have something going on, I'd love to know about it and definitely promote it. But yeah, just let people know how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, well, I'm on Twitter, the Bert Emanuel Rule. Very simple. You can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm on Instagram as well, Bert Emanuel Senior. I'm actually really looking at how I can dig a little deeper into the rule, the catch, the photo, and maybe start looking at leveraging that a little bit in terms of merchandise and some other activities. And so I'm really working with that. I have, access and copyrights to the photo now. Looking at possibly launching an NFT
Oh,
someday,
most definitely.
and so that would be kind of cool. But most of our time, I'm actually right now at sitting at our church. We give a lot to our church. All of our kids work and volunteer at our church on Sundays. My wife actually is the children's director, and so they have a father-daughter dance tonight. All of my daughters are grown up, but we're here helping in any capacity that we can. We love our church. It's River Point Church out in the Fort Bend area. Um, and so we spend a lot of time here. My son, he helps teach in the kindergarten room, and all the little kids, come to the games and watch him play. And he's got a little bobblehead, and that someone made because he was Player of the Year. So we have a lot of time. We spend a lot of time together as a family. But it, you know, I try to stay connected through Twitter and Instagram,
Mhm.
and so those are social platforms, that will have some things that I'll be doing. I'm also launching. I forgot to mention this. I'm also launching a texting service where people can actually text me directly and ask me questions, and I'll be responding to those questions about 3 times a week. It's a subscription service. I'm going to launch it probably an hour before the Bucs game this Sunday, And so if you go to Twitter, you'll probably see a tweet that I tweeted out. But there's a text number that you can text and then get signed up and get some of your other questions asked or answered.
Most definitely, man. I'll probably be at the front of the line, man. You are great football mind, man, and I greatly appreciate you.
Hey,
And
no problem.
all right, and for me, I'm really looking forward to this game. Really excited. So much history, as you guys know, from '79 to '99, and here we are. You know, in a similar position where this could the Bucs either win or go home. So, big game this weekend. And you can reach me at Buck What You Heard. You follow me, I'll follow you back. And I enjoy talking about it. It doesn't have to be football. It could be crypto. It could be wrestling or just whatever. I'm all about it. So I
Exactly.
appreciate it, and I appreciate everybody taking time to chime in and chat where you could be out doing something else, but you're here listening to this. So I greatly appreciate that. And Bert, I will have you on again, man. I greatly appreciate you. But we'll go ahead and get off here, and I'll let you get back to your family. Tell your wife and your family thank you for letting me borrow you for this little bit of time, and it's greatly appreciated.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. And that's Bert Emanuel, and we are out of here.